It's been around 11 months now, and love it or hate it, Liquid Glass is here to stay. And in one of my previous videos, I said that I would look at how we could bring this to the web. So I did. This is Liquid Glass running in the browser. The web already has some glassy kind of tools, like the obvious one is Backdrop Filter. Funny enough, Apple has a bit of history here. They helped popularize the frosted glass look back in iOS 7, and Safari was one of the first browsers to support Backdrop Filter, which meant that we could bring the same kind of frosted UI from the native OS into the web. You know, add a bit of blur, a bit of transparency, a border and a shadow, and suddenly you've got glass, or at least frosted glass. But Liquid Glass is not frosted glass. It bends and refracts content behind it. It has these edge highlights, a little bit of magnification, a color separation, and this lens-like distortion that makes the UI feel more like a material than a flat layer. So my first thought was, let's use SVG filters. And judging by pretty much everyone online, I definitely am not the only person who had this idea. There's a guy called Chris from France, and he made a really good version of this with SVG filters. And honestly, it looks awesome. He goes way deeper into the refraction side of it, using displacement maps, surface shapes, specular highlights, and some of the physics-inspired thinking around how light bends through glass. But for what I wanted, there's still a few problems. To start, you can run into a lot of aliasing issues and you get these kind of crunchy edges. Also, performance can fall off pretty quickly, especially on mobile, or when you start putting lots of these on screen. And I wanted a lot more control for real moving components, multiple lenses, and also Android. So how are we going to do it? Out of nowhere, the experimental HTML and Canvas API started dropping. This is currently behind a feature flag, but it lets us take actual HTML elements and draw them into a canvas, and then manipulate that rendered output. The important thing is it's still real HTML. This means buttons, slides, toggles, navigation bars, and everything else are just as accessible as they were before. But once we draw to a canvas, we can treat the result more like an image. And you can probably see where this is going. If we render the HTML into a canvas and then pass that canvas into WebGL, we can start doing shader stuff to it. Now, I should be clear, I am just a little old front-end developer, and I'm spiritually bound to JavaScript, React, and CSS. But shader toy exists. The internet's out there. And with a little bit of focused AI assistance, we can get somewhere surprisingly close without having to know any shader languages. We can start by creating a provider. The provider wraps the app and sets up a few layers for us. We've got a canvas that acts as the base, we've got one for rendering the glass effect, and another one for rendering any kind of overlays we want. It sounds a bit cursed, but it's a pretty simple idea overall. The important bridge here is the draw element image function. This lets us take real DOM elements, measure where it is, and then draw it back into the canvas at the same time. This is great as it allows the browser to render the HTML exactly how it is, and then we can basically capture that as an image and feed it directly into our effects pipeline. Once we have that canvas as a texture, WebGL can start sampling from it. I don't have to wire this up manually for each time I make a button or a slider, so we'll make a Liquid Glass wrapper component that can house all these effects. Also in this component, if the browser doesn't export the experimental API, we just fall back to a normal CSS glass style rather than our entire application exploding. Now we've got our components and providers, I actually need to build something with it. So I started just with the toggle, partially because the iris toggle is one of the classic Liquid Glass examples, and partly also because I thought it'd be an easy one to do. I thought it'd be nice to add a couple of other components as well. So a slider, a button, I did a bottom navigation, which I think looks great. Basically all the components that stood out from Apple's sizzle reel. The bottom navigation is probably the most satisfying because this is where Liquid Glass really starts to look cool. It floats above the content, it catches the background as you move around, and it starts to feel more like a material rather than just an overlay. Now, is this all perfect? No. Absolutely not. This API is still experimental. You need a Chrome flag to enable it. There's quirks. Sometimes your rendering gets messed up. So I wouldn't think about productionizing this anytime soon. But honestly, I think this is really promising. Funnily enough, because this is available on Android too, if we enable the feature flag, you can see it running fine on Android. There's a lot more we could obviously do with this. We could make more components. We could try and make an application with it. We could probably improve the shader a little bit as well. But I'm pretty happy with how it is now. There's a demo for this in the description if you want to have a play around with it. You will have to enable the Chrome feature flag, but on the page it will tell you which one you need to do if you don't have it enabled. And that's pretty much it. I do want to shout out Chris for his really good blog post and in-depth guide for SVG filters, as well as a bunch of people on Shaded Toy that have tried to make this in some way or another in the past. It'd be super interesting to test this on other browsers if and when they start to support the HTML and Canvas API. But for now, I think that's it.